Okay, folks, I know what you're thinking. Where is my Dino King review? Come on! Dino King was the winner of the poll. Why is it we're getting an Inglorious Rex review? Well, I can explain. First thing is that Inglorious Rex Volume 3 is closing up its campaign in the next couple of days, so I had to read Volumes 1 and 2 to figure out whether I was going to back Volume 3, and as it turns out, I will be. Congratulations, you will be getting more of my money. And the other thing that happened was when I opened up Dino King, I saw these 3 words in the table of contents. Previously in Xenotype, and I thought, oh crap, I knew there was a Xenotype book out there by Liam Gray, but I didn't realize that they occupied a shared universe or that I might need to know what happened in Xenotype in order to appreciate what happened in Dino King. So I thought, okay, well, given that, I'll put the Dino King review on the shelf for a while until I can confirm whether or not I actually need to read this Xenotype first, because I could wait for a second printing. I don't have a problem with that. Now, Liam Gray has informed me that Dino King can be read independently of Xenotype number 1, so I'll take him at his word on that and get started on the review later. But in the meantime, we've got the Inglorious Rex review, also because Shane Davis mentioned that it's got a little Rocky in it. And I got to tell you, I do love Rocky. This is one of the best movies of all time. It was surprisingly good considering how cheesy some of the sequels are. But Rocky, especially the first one, is like the best of the best of the best, and deservedly won Oscars. And the only problem is that after reading Inglorious Rex number 1, I gotta say, Rocky this ain't. And we'll get into why after doing a quick look at the creators of Inglorious Rex number 1. It was written by Shane Davis and Yanzi Lin, pencils by Shane Davis, inks by Yanzi Lin, colored by Jason Wright, lettered by Eric Weathers, edited by Amanda J. Lamella. And let's get directly into my pet peeves. Now, these are things that you've probably seen a lot of in my other videos, and I'm just going to bring up a few of them here. This is not going to be a tremendously comprehensive review because I don't want to spoil the ending of Inglorious Rex number 1, and also because I don't want to go through and just nitpick every page with possibilities on what could have been done just a slight bit better, because you can see things here and there in terms of the dialogue, like maybe I wouldn't have said it exactly that way, maybe I would have had this emphasized rather than that. And with that, let's get into the emphasis part, because I'm going to mention that in conjunction with this first paragraph, which says, life is about taking the hard knocks before you get to the big payday. And I have to kind of hand it to Shane Davis and Yanzi Lin on this particular box, because this caption box, because it does follow one of the rules of good storytelling, which is make sure to inform your reader of the theme of your book early on. So this is basically the theme of the book. Life is about taking the hard knocks before you get to the big payday. Where I have some quibbles about this is the fact that this is kind of a vacuous kind of theme. I mean, you can apply this theme to just about any story. But also the fact that the emphasis in here is kind of split on the words. I would think that hard knocks is an expression all itself. I mean, you generally don't hear about gentle knocks or light knocks. I mean, hard knocks is just basically what you say. You don't even say knocks by itself. I would have emphasized both words, and because you have those both emphasized, I would emphasize big as well as payday. Or just leave the emphasis off. You don't always need to have emphasis on these statements. You don't want to get to the point where you're leaving out emphasizing important words, which I'll show an example of that a little later on. But, emphasis is something that you can use in reserve and use sparingly. So whether you have both of these words emphasized in each of these boxes, or whether you have neither of them emphasized, either one of those would have worked. Same thing with the box down below where it says, and there's no end in sight. You don't really need no end to be emphasized. Same thing on the next page when he says, what am I fighting for right now? Well, fighting doesn't need to be emphasized either, as if it's some kind of special word. What does need to be emphasized, however, are the first names of the people who are described in the scene. You have Alex, you have T, and you have Cam. These are all important players. They should all have their names emphasized so that the reader will know to make mental notes of these names. Now we have one of my other favorite pet peeves, which is the splash page for no reason. You get a look at the guy who is, not even a remarkable looking guy. He's kind of like Peter Parker, who is by definition unremarkable. And he's thinking a bunch of stuff, but you could shrink this down probably to a quarter of a panel, and then, or a quarter of a page, sorry. And then use the rest of the real estate on that page to show us what happens when the fight starts up. Because what actually happens is the fight starts up. I'm looking forward to a real climactic thing, and instead, this guy takes one shot to the head and goes down. Now, I will say that looks like a bunch of MMA clips that I've seen in the past. Somebody just basically takes a shot, and then all of a sudden he's down on the canvas. But that's not real entertainment when you're reading a comic. You want to see more than just that. You want to see, even if all he's doing is contemplating kicking the guy and then seeing him drop the guy drop his right arm. You want to go through that process before you get to this, because, like you said, it's all about taking the hard knocks before getting to the big payday. This is just sliding us right up into the big payday. So let's go into some other story problems. And before we can get into the story problems, we need to talk about what is the basic story of Inglorious Rex #1. And it's this. Nate Stone was a top fighter on the Rex Monster martial arts circuit until he was killed by his opponent's illegal move. Years later, Nate's younger brother Alex, a mixed martial arts fighter, is offered the chance to save his brother's clone monster 232 from being ruthlessly decommissioned, i.e. killed, ground up for food, by piloting the monster in a revenge match with his brother's killer. Alex agrees and begins training with 232 under Nate's old coach, their father. Alex's girlfriend, the Rex fighter Anatomic, is ungraciously sidelined so that Alex can have his match. So she had a chance at the top spot, which it would have been with Nate Stone's killer, but Alex instead is getting to slide right in there in front of her. Now, my first problem with the story is that Alex is not a credible threat. He's not even an MMA champion in his own right. You see him winning his fight, but there's practically nobody in the crowd, which shows that this is an MMA contest of no real significance, except to him, personally. You barely see any seats filled in there at all, which just speaks to the fact that this is some very, very low-card fight, low-ranking fight, and why should we have any idea that Alex ought to be able to win a contest against someone who's in a different sport than him, not to mention being at the top of that sport. Next, we have the fact that his girlfriend Anna is less disciplined than Alex is. We have a scene where basically they've already banged once, and now she's saying, my big strong boyfriend won another fight and I only rewarded him once. And he says, we shouldn't right before your fight. And she says, oh, hush. Okay, I remember this from Rocky. Sex weakens the legs. And, but I would expect her to be the one respecting that if she's actually a top contender here. It's the fighters who are actually able to discipline themselves who deservedly win. And so the fact that she's willing to cast this rule aside, a rule that he even reminds her about, it just speaks to our not caring when she gets brushed aside so that he can have his shot at the title holder. So this is actually working against, this is a little thing that's actually working against the dynamic here. If he had basically said, want to go again? And she's like, no, I can't right before a fight. then we would have said, oh, this is somebody who's willing to sacrifice in order to achieve her dreams, and then to have her dreams squashed by him getting to slide in right in front of her, that would have made it hurt. But as it is, we're just kind of like, well, you probably wouldn't have won against the guy anyway. One part we've already encountered is that the fights in the book progress too quickly. For example, we had the fight between Alex and his opponent that was just plain old mixed martial arts, but it also happens to be the same way when we get into the monster martial arts. For example, here is the opening scene between Anatomic and her monster Razor, fighting the much larger green monster up above. And after one punch, we get this hilarious bit of dialogue. Razor can't take much more of this. Gotta make this count. Like, seriously? You give us one punch, and then we're already into the finishing move. No demonstrations of speed or skill or anything? I'm just sitting there like, the fight's already over, practically, after one punch. It's not entertaining to see something like that. You have to be able to show more action than just, a single punch and, oh my god, this could be the end of me. One of the things I noticed is that there seems to be a lot of Rex death in Inglorious Rex. Not that it's portrayed, but that it's implied. For example, after Anatomic wins by killing her opponent's monster, it says, and that's 34 straight wins for Superstar Anatomic. Boy, Modesty does not look happy about this loss. Well, what do you expect? Rex has cost a fortune to clone, and she just got her Rex's head kicked right off. Now, the way that the announcers are reacting, they don't seem terribly surprised at this outcome. It's like, it might not be the most common outcome in a Rex match, but it's not so uncommon that they're like, oh my god, I can't believe she actually killed the other person's monster. So, apparently Rex death is something that frequently happens in the world of Inglorious Rex. Then later, when Anna finds out about Alex's plan to pilot his brother's Rex, she says, that's suicide. You can't pilot a Rex not cloned from you. And although that turns out to not be as impossible as she thinks it is, one of the things that this does imply is that you also need a human being with talent in order to to get a good Rex. So the talent kind of comes almost all from the human, which means the human is not expendable. This is especially true when you look at this section of dialogue that says, Grand Champion Nate Stone was pilot to Rex 232 for a record-holding 67 career wins before his untimely demise in the cage. He has defended Ark City 2 times against attacks. Okay, so let's put all the pieces together here. First, we find out that a Rex must be cloned from the body of its intended pilot, so both the human being and the monster are not expendable. Cloning a Rex is exorbitantly expensive, another reason why Rexes ought to be preserved rather than destroyed. And Rexes have been used to defend the city against invaders. Now that's particularly important because once you combine all this information together, what you get is this scenario. Rex pilots are actually soldiers in a war against an enemy thought to be dormant. Yet instead of preserving these warriors and their war machines in case the enemy returns, the government allows them to engage in performative sporting events that sometimes result in the loss of one of these warriors or his or her war machine? I mean, it's almost like this is like the preseason games in football where you get people getting injured and sidelined, and you wonder, why do they even have these games if they're just exhibition matches, if they're not actually going to count for something? Why in the world would you have these monsters fighting against one another and dying at this rate? Another thing that rang hollow is that Anna is only upset about one thing. If you look at all of her complaints throughout the book, the only thing that she ever complains about is the fact that her boyfriend might actually get killed. For one thing, he's trying to pilot a Rex that's not cloned from him. And the other thing is that both the monster and he are not ready for this fight, and she knows it. But what about her own ambitions? I mean, she's just had herself pushed out of the way so that he could have his shot. Why is she not complaining about that? Where is her feeling of betrayal? Where is her feeling of envy? That should be there. Even if she tries to suppress it, it should be something that we can feel from her. And yet we don't get any sense of that. Another thing that doesn't quite make sense is why Alex and his dad are estranged from each other. We see Alex go to meet the trainer of the Rex 232, and it turns out to be his dad. And from their dialogue, look who's finally decided to show his face around here. You still taking fights? Well, yeah, just want to fight just last night, actually. Good, good. It's like, okay, why are they not speaking to each other? Why are they not communicating? I mean, you still taking fights. I mean, that's what his son is an MMA fighter, and so apparently they don't communicate often enough, such that if he did have a change of heart and a change of profession, or change of hobby, whatever you want to call it, then the father wouldn't know about it. Now, we do see that the father approves of the fact that he's in the mixed martial arts league. He didn't want his son to become a Rex fighter, and Alex didn't become a Rex fighter. So again, why are Alex and his dad estranged if Alex basically did what he wanted? And what's really kind of silly is that you've got this last bit of dialogue that says, "You've never listened to me before. Maybe you'll listen to me in the cage." But he didn't become a Rex fighter. He did listen to you. So I don't even know what he's talking about now. It doesn't really make sense that the two of them are estranged here. And last but not least is Nate's lame legacy. Nate is supposed to be this champion who, previously defended the city, and Alex looked up to him, and the father, of course, loved the kid. But when you actually look back at Nate, you only know two things about him. One is that he died. He died unceremoniously in the ring, due possibly to an illegal move on his opponent's part. But that's not enough to really elevate him to a hero status. However, neither is this, which is like horrible advice. Don't worry about being great. Everybody that I ever fought was great. You need to worry about becoming epic. Well, that makes no damn sense. There's nothing about this that makes any sense at all. That's just wordplay. You're just replacing one praise word with another praise word and expecting that to make some kind of sense. What does being epic versus being great mean? You don't even learn that. I mean, he's just basically this hero figure martyr type who gives bad advice, and that's all he is. So it's hard to look at this guy and think of him in kind of the idealized frame that the other characters seem to relate to him in. Now let's get into art problems, because there are a couple, one of which is establishing scale. When you've got man and monster together, one of the things that really helps is to establish up front just how big these things are compared to a human being, which doesn't happen right off. We get this, this is probably the first page that gives us any idea of the scale of a monster, and I'm looking at this page and saying, okay, well, I see Anatomic is in her armor, and she's juicing up, and she has this line of dialogue saying, "I can feel Razor's breathing syncing with mine. Her heartbeat is echoing in my chest." It's like, okay, well, wherever the creature is, I guess she's off somewhere. And then we look, and we've got Alex and Anatomic standing on this platform, and Anatomic is hooked by these wires into this metal thing. And then off in the distance, we see a mural, what looks like, of a giant monster, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that's very decorative, but I wonder where the creature is. Because I have no idea what the creature looks like. I have no idea how tall the creature's supposed to be. I have no idea of anything regarding the creature. This just looks like a big picture to me. It's the creature. I mean, that's actually the creature standing there, and I had no idea. I mean, I literally went to the next page thinking I had not seen the creature yet. Because I just looked at that and thought, oh, well, that's an interesting picture. Nobody's referring to it as the creature, though, so I guess that's just a picture. You know, when you have these kinds of monsters in your book, you've got to establish what the scale is so that your reader can know what details he's supposed to be picking out. You know, tell us how many stories tall they are, or tell us, give us some sort of indication of the height, or better yet, have the creature like grunt or something, so that we can know that that's actually the creature. But otherwise, it just looks like a picture. Next, there's a bifocal perspective that we're treated to, and that's when we get into the first fight between Razor and Razor's opponent. I forget the name of the creature, if that creature's ever named. We get like a way, way, way telescopic view of the fight, and then all of a sudden we're slammed up front with the fight like right in our face. And neither of these views is optimal because, on the one hand, you can barely see anything. On the other hand, you see a lot that's in the frame, but there's also a lot that's not off the frame, which results in a lot of clipping. And the clipping is especially distressful when you want to see the fullness of the action that's going on. You've got this scene here where Anatomic and Razor are about to put the finishing move on this creature. I mean, to kick its bloody head off. But question: is Razor's foot bladed or not? I don't know because it's off the damn page. You know, can you zoom out a little so that I can see the entire scene? I don't want to watch something that's just in this pan and scan kind of format. Give me the whole scene, even if that means shrinking things down. The other thing that just kind of blows my mind is the fact that there's a lack of majesty shot throughout this book. Um, I was kind of expecting to see scenes with man and monster together in a way that would remind me of these pictures from Sedona. I actually went to Sedona, Arizona a few years back, where they have these red rock formations that are right up close to civilization. And to see man's technology and natural beauty right up close and majestic like that, it's really an awe-inspiring sight. But that sense of awe is really lacking in Inglorious Rex when you get scenes like the first time we see 232 and he's getting pummeled, or, well, he's just been pummeled as a sparring Rex, and so he's holding his aching head, sitting there in what almost looks like a diaper, and about to eat a cow. He looks like a guy who's been, conscripted into bum fighting for room and board. It's not a majestic scene. And I just, I feel like whatever it was that I was coming to this comic book for, I'm not getting a delivery on that. Because what I really would have liked to have seen was something that would make me look at one of these monsters and think, oh, damn, that is something impressive. Wow. And I never get that sense throughout the book. So let me give some closing notes here, and one of which is that the characters are way too simplistic. They're all practically describable in one sentence. And to have a complex character, you need to be able to at least assign like multiple motives so that you're not just driving home a single point of view from that one character. I mean, yeah, Alex wants revenge, but what else does he want? What else does he want to get out of this fight? What about the fact that this constitutes a betrayal of his girlfriend? How come that doesn't serve as a plot point? Same thing from Anna's point of view. Like I said before, she's worried about how Alex is going to do in the ring, but she doesn't believe in him. That's a problem. But also, what about the fact that her dream is being deferred on his account? Even when you have the enemy who killed Nate Stone back in the day, why is it that he can't have conflicting motives as well? Because, on one hand, he's being told by Little T, who is the manager of all these fights, that he's got to stretch the fight out, and at the same time, he's conflicted about, can he not be conflicted about the fact that he really wants to put a beat down on this monster once and for all to prove that he's the best guy? It seems like he just subordinates his desires to Little T, and there's no further conflict after that. Little T himself doesn't seem like a very complex character. He's just looking to make as much utilitarian use out of everybody around him that he can find. And that's pretty much it. Um, Even the dad, I mean, the dad just doesn't want to lose any more of his sons than he already has. But what about the fact that, his son actually went down, was killed by this guy? Where's his desire to see revenge against the other guy? So you could have all of these conflicting kind of desires coming up. And if you don't, then you can't get your reader to make a deep connection with these characters because they're too shallow to get connected. And like you say at the beginning of the book, the reader, in this case, needs to feel the hard knocks to get the big payoff. You need to have these characters in conflict with one another and in conflict with themselves so that when the resolution takes place at the end, the reader gets that feeling of relief, like, oh, okay, this is the way moving forward, all of these things get satisfied or resolved. Another thing that bothers me is that this isn't a tale of heroism or even sportsmanship, and I can't go into too much detail without revealing too much about the ending of the book. But I'm just reminded of all the complaints that have been made about ISOM #1 and how Avery Silman really doesn't care about saving anybody. He just wants to get revenge for being disrespected, and he's willing to go through all of these, to the lengths of, well, not really killing the bouncers, but really badly injuring a bunch of bouncers in Darren's club to accomplish his goals. And when I look at Inglorious Rex #1, I see pretty much the same thing. You got motive, revenge, means, whatever works. I can't really go into too much more detail than that. But it becomes a tale of revenge that champions no values. And so it doesn't even feel like a tale of heroism or sport, such that the reader is supposed to come away feeling like, this is the way I should act in the world, which is one of the benefits of reading heroic literature. Now, the book doesn't have to be that way. I just kind of find it a little ironic that when people make complaints, and it's not necessarily Shane Davis who's made the complaint, even Matt Skyver's made the complaint more often than not, that Isom is not a hero. Well, I don't see Alex Stone as a hero either. I don't know why anyone would. So that's another problem. And the last part is the epilogue, and which I can't talk about again because that kind of spoils things, but it only serves to diminish the meaningfulness of the ending. You see the wider context. The epilogue basically introduces you to the wider the wider context of Inglorious Rex's world, and all of a sudden, everything that you've just seen, all of the conflict that you've just seen, seems so small compared to what the real problems in the world are, that you come away thinking, okay, sure, this happened, but in the grand scheme of things, what does it matter? I mean, yeah, yay for you. You got your little triumph, but you didn't change the world with it. And so it would have been better to give the reader the epilogue's knowledge at the start to manage the scope of expectations. In a world that, has the problems it has, maybe these kinds of small victories are the only things that you can really aspire to, but to do it in that reverse order just kind of drains the energy out of the victory. So let's see, what is the overall score that I'm going to give Inglorious Rex #1? Here are my previous contenders, all the way from the absolute disaster that is Gooding the Polymath, up to the relative triumph that is Cyberfrog #2, and Inglorious Rex #1 goes right in the middle. I'm giving it a 5.0. And the reason for that is really just the fact that it's a very flat story that doesn't really feel aspirational in its delivery. It doesn't leave you feeling like there was a true champion crowned in the sense of both the sport and in the sense of the story. It's like, yeah, somebody got what he wanted, but it didn't feel like the good guys won. It just felt like somebody managed to get his selfish desire fulfilled. Yay for him. And on to whatever the next challenge is going to be. Which is slightly obvious if you think about it, because who was up for the title round before, or who was up for a title match before? Yeah, the girlfriend. So you can expect to see them conflict in Inglorious Rex Volume 2, which I have read, by the way. And I will say that I think a lot of the depth issues that I found in Inglorious Rex #1 start to be fleshed out in Inglorious Rex #2 and will probably continue to be in Inglorious Rex Volume 3. But the problem I have is one of too little too late. I mean, if I had bought just Inglorious Rex Volume 1 at the time, and I did not have if I did not also buy Inglorious Rex Volume 2 at the same time because I was trying to catch myself up, I don't know if I would have gone any farther than that. I mean, we had a series of characters that, had their own little conflict, resolved their own little conflict, and now I could kind of care less about any of them. So, would I have actually gone forward and tried to invest myself in them further? Well, even having Inglorious Rex Volume 2 and reading through that in an attempt to see whether or not I'd be getting Volume 3, I didn't feel inclined to do that. I felt more inclined to move on to some other property. Even as I was reading, it's like, okay, I see how this story is progressing, although it does kind of do a little bit of reversal in order to provide a bit more setup to get to the match that we all know is coming. But I just didn't feel like whatever depth was added to these characters made up for what felt like a relatively flat experience from the get-go. I almost feel like Inglorious Rex Volumes 1 through 3 would have been better if they had been planned or plotted out as a trilogy to be read as such, to where part 1 was going to be a part 1, where part 2 was going to be a part 2, where part 3 was going to be a part 3, and you didn't have part 1 doubling as its own story, because it really needed more investment in that first portion to get the reader's interest to carry through to the next couple of volumes. So, Rocky the Saint. Yeah, I cannot. Your mileage may vary. I've got the links in the description. You can still pick up Inglorious Rex Volume 3, the 3-pack, which I will be, just because I thought, well, I didn't want to do Inglorious Rex Volume 2 as its own review because it's really only the first half of the story. Hopefully, Inglorious Rex Volume 3 will complete that half, and I will be able to do a composite review of Inglorious Rex Volumes 2 and 3. Maybe what you've seen in here, as far as the artwork and as far as some of the basic dialogue, has piqued your interest. If so, feel free to click on the link. Either of the links, I've got one to the Nine Lives Comics site and one to the Indiegogo site in the video description, and go ahead and fund this campaign at either location. You can pick up all of the previous issues as well as the supplementals, and the supplementals do a little bit of adding on to the lore and backstory of Inglorious Rex. They're not essential things, but at the same time, they help to flesh out the world. I don't know if I'll bother doing a review with those in the future, but your mileage may vary. In Inglorious Rex, yeah, don't make rocket comparisons. I'm Mike Partika. Thank you for watching, and hopefully the next thing I will be doing is Dino King. Now that I've got the go-ahead from Liam Gray to read that without the benefit of Xenotype, and so we will see where we go from there. Thanks again for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and I will talk to you later.